Now, this being the last speech, heck, my last speech of the 09 and 010 season, what I want to do now is essentially, as I learned from one of my novices, take this very muddled debate. Let's take a step back. Let's look at the resolution itself. Look at where we started, where we came from, and why the affirmative case still stands at the very end of this. Now, I want you to think about something very important Cole Franklin said in his last speech over and over. He talked about democratic voices. Now, think about that for a second. Who's responsible? The Republicans or the Democrats? Well, he doesn't really give you Democrats. He gives you democratic voices. So let's look at the preponderance of evidence and see who's really at fault here. Now, yes, these things were passed in a bipartisan manner, but that doesn't mean they're both equally at fault just because some did and some didn't. For instance, when Representative Cowell, who was a Republican, did vote for the health care bill, didn't make it bipartisan, and it didn't make it the Republicans' fault too. But what we want to look at here is who's at fault by the preponderance of evidence. So let's look at that evidence. I give you the Democratic opposition to Iraq. I talked about the Ys, W&Ds, which came from George Bush, the Republican president. I talked about FISA, which allows them to wiretap you and hack your computers. I talked about torture. I talked about them opening your mail. I talked about free speech zones. I talked about habeas corpus. I talked about the tax cuts, and I talked about the lack of stability. That is a whole lot of evidence for why the Republicans are primarily responsible. And all Cole can offer to that is say, well, it's bipartisan, but that doesn't make Republicans not responsible. And the only other thing he can really offer you is this concept of democratic voices. Well, I'm sorry, Cindy Sheehan and Michael Moore are not part of the Democratic Party. They're not representatives here. So even if you accept the Democratic voices, who's really at fault? The Republicans or the Democrats? He doesn't give you Democrats. I give you Dick Cheney, the Vice President of the United States. I give you Senator Jim DeMint. And I give you Newbar, who called Stupak a baby killer. These people are elected officials of the Republican Party. So who started this lack of stability? Democratic voices, people who are unaffiliated, can't be blamed. Democrats can't be blamed for that. So who started it? The Republican elected officials who called people baby killers and called the president a liar during the State of the Union? Or Democratic voices who can't really be tied back? When we look at these things, when we look at the preponderance of the evidence, I show you time and time again, example after example after example of what the Republicans did and why they're to blame. Yeah, some Democrats voted for that. The Democrats are partially at fault. And maybe they participated in it, but it doesn't mean they started it. Iraq was a Republican idea. Waterboarding was a Republican idea. FISA, torture, Postal Reauthorization Act, free speech zones, all Republican ideas. All these things that took us away from that wonderful bipartisanship we had from 9/11 were Republican ideas. So when you look at this, who really started this? Who's really to blame? It's the Republican Party. Again, thank you all for watching.